The day Jude Stanton died at 2:14 p.m., it wasn't storming. There was no dramatic thunder or flicker of lights, just a soft breeze through the curtains and the flat line of the heart monitor. Leila held his hand as it grew colder, her fingers gliding over his skin like reading Braille, as if memorizing the life they spent together. "That's it?" she whispered when the nurse nodded, and just like that, grief moved in, quiet and suffocating like fog. Outside, life continued unbothered. Pedestrians sipped coffee, cars moved on, and by 3:45 p.m., not a single person from Leila's family had called. She once believed heartbreak came with casseroles, friends on your couch, and a mother whispering, "Come home." But instead, silence answered her pain. Even before Jude died, no one had asked how she was. Not her mother, who changed the subject to curtains, or her sister, who never texted back after Jude was taken in an ambulance. Emotional neglect did not yell. It simply didn't show up. And now, her phone stood testament to that truth. No missed calls, no new messages, just a hollow digital display of absence. The funeral was small. Jude's colleagues cried harder than anyone she called family. Her father sent a half-hearted text, her mother wasn't feeling well, Amelia couldn't make it. Lonely among strangers, Leila stood at the podium and spoke of a man who was soft where the world was hard, who, even dying, had picked her cardamom buns in traffic. That night, she sat beside untouched candles and replayed his last message. "Hey love, traffic's a mess. Thought of that baker you like. Love you." She wept, not just for the love lost, but for the realization of how few others ever thought to love her that way. And as dawn broke across a silent skyline, Leila whispered a new promise into the stillness. No more crumbs, no more pretending, no more chasing voices that disappear when she needs them most. This breaking wasn't her ending. It was her beginning. It had been 16 days since Jude died, 16 days of silence, of calendar days ticking by on autopilot, and a grief so heavy it drowned out everything else. Leila had begun setting the table for one instead of two, a small gesture that haunted her more than she could explain. She couldn't move his toothbrush, couldn't delete the grocery list magnetized to the fridge, couldn't touch the sweatshirt hanging on the bedroom door that still smelled like him, eucalyptus and old books. The dining room no longer felt like a home. It was a museum now, frozen in time. Love abandoned. On the 17th day, an invitation arrived, not from her mother, not from her sister Amelia, not from Mia, her best friend who had once sworn she'd always be there, but from an email list. Amelia's engagement dinner, polished in gold foil, complete with RSVP buttons and assumptions. No personal message, no condolences, just the expectation she'd perform her role as the ignored, grieving sister with grace. One line buried deep in her inbox echoed louder than anything. "Can you confirm if Jude's still coming to Mom's birthday?" That had been Amelia's last text during hospice. No, how are you? No, is he okay? Just a head count. At dinner that night, Leila picked at her salad and remembered when Amelia used to sneak into her bed during thunderstorms with flashlights and ghost stories. They had once been sisters in the truest sense, but that girl was long gone, replaced by someone who weaponized ambition and wore affection only when it fit a narrative. Jude had called it years ago. She's like a warm room, but get too close and you'll burn. When Leila finally stared at the RSVP and hovered over no, doubt crept in. Would they call her dramatic again? Say she was performing grief to feel important? In her family, silence wasn't absence, it was punishment. One day before the dinner, her phone rang at last. Mia. Not her mother, not Amelia, Mia.
The ghost of a friend who had vanished when she was needed most. "Don't hang up," Mia begged. Leila, her voice raw, didn't spare her. "You left me," she said plainly. Mia offered excuses, pressure, confusion, Amelia, her mother, but the wound had been made. Mia whispered brokenly that Marie had called the funeral too bleak and said Leila would understand. "Understand?" Leila repeated, stunned. "You chose shrimp platters over holding my hand. Jude asked for you before he died." When the call ended, Leila sat in Jude's old dining chair and pulled open the drawer. Among old receipts and pens was a note card. Jude's handwriting. "Don't forget to eat when I'm not here. It matters. You matter. Jay." With it pressed to her chest, she wept harder than she had at the funeral. And when Saturday came and her family gathered around Amelia's sapphire ring and pretentious candles, Leila walked into the lakeside shelter instead. offering to serve meals, signing the forms with shaky hands, wearing a name tag that simply said Leila. Not widow, not forgotten, just Leila, as she attempted to believe three powerful words: you matter. At the engagement dinner, Amelia turned to Mia and hissed she didn't even bother to show, to which Mia, eyes on her wine glass, responded softly, "Neither did you." By sunset, she curled in a faded armchair near the wood stove, cooked lentils, buttered bread, and sat beneath flickering warmth, not smiling because she wasn't grieving, but because, for once, no one was asking her to shrink, to apologize, or to explain the ache. Her phone buzzed once. A text from Marie, laced with cold control. "Be home tomorrow at 10. We'll send Jessica if needed." But the very idea of that apartment being her home was laughable now, like a script written by strangers. Leila didn't respond. She unplugged the charger and turned the phone face down. That night, she lit her first fire alone. Not to forget Jude, but to begin beside his memory. In that silent stone house tucked between ocean and shadow, the air didn't taste like apology anymore. It tasted like peace. Marie Stanton placed her phone down with controlled force as Jessica sat stiffly, untouched tea in hand, on the pristine cream love seat. "She saw the message," Jessica asked. Marie's lips tightened. "Read it. Ignored it." Eddie lowered his newspaper and added, "She blocked my number this morning." Marie's breath caught, not in pain, but offense. After all, they were simply cleaning up the estate, tidying the future, ensuring Amelia got what she deserved. Leila didn't need to know Amelia now owned part of the apartment unless she returned to make a scene. "What kind of daughter leaves after a loss?" Marie huffed. Jessica, quiet but firm, said, "Maybe the kind no one came looking for." Because in the Stanton home, grief wasn't foreign, but it had always been something to hide, not something to feel. When Amelia arrived at noon in her camel coat, oversized sunglasses, and polished armor, Marie welcomed her with a smile and a compliment. "It's not a negotiation," Eddie muttered, as Jessica simply watched, increasingly uneasy, as the family performed sorrow like a cocktail party. When she softly reminded them that Leila was grieving, Amelia snapped, "So are we." But no one had gone to the funeral. They'd sent flowers. Jessica had even been the one made to pick them up. Marie's voice lifted, proud. "I did not raise daughters to fall apart every time life delivers a tragedy." Jessica met her gaze. "But it gave you the right to ignore her pain?" Marie turned away. Meanwhile, far from polished silence and curated emotional distance, Leila was planting tulip bulbs in Barrow Curve, under a faded sun, hands in the earth, humming slightly off-key, just the way Jude used to tease her about. The house stood with her, like it remembered. Her phone remained powered off, not to punish, but to protect. No more refreshing her inbox for wedding invites or half-hearted apologies. The peace wasn't in revenge. It was in her refusal to re-bleed for people who never noticed the wound. That evening, after tea and quiet, she opened Jude's old sketchbook, finding a hidden sketchbook nestled inside with scrawled dreams. And at the back, a folded letter, familiar ink, eerie handwriting. Marie Stanton, 1997. Her mother's words finally unwrapped, a truth that stilled her heart. Marie admitted her failure, not from hate, but brokenness, that she starved Leila of affection because she saw in her the softness she herself had buried, that Jude had begged her to reach out 3 years ago, and she never did, that this letter wasn't redemption, just regret sealed by time and death. Still, it was something, not enough to rewrite the past, but maybe enough to explain it. And for Leila, sometimes the truth was the key that healed more than apology ever could. Her mother could never love what mirrored her own buried grief. Back in the Stanton household, Jessica clutched her coat, drowning in cold civility, while Marie rattled on about duty and appearances. Finally, Jessica stood. "I spoke to Leila. She's in peace." Marie's voice cracked. "And what about us?" Jessica replied,
She gave you the chance to show up. You chose silence, again and again. She turned to Amelia. You cut her out the day she stopped being useful. Don't act shocked that she left. Amelia tried. We didn't turn our backs. But Jessica's words sliced gently. You never turned to face her in the first place. And with that, Jessica walked away from marble floors and framed portraits and pastel performances, not because she was noble, but because she had once vanished too, and this time she chose not to.
A confession, not crafted for sympathy, but for truth. A mother admitting she was never a mother in the way it mattered, that she thought providing was the same as nurturing, that she broke Leila's softness because she was never taught how to carry her own, that she was jealous of Jude for inspiring love, for making Leila laugh from her stomach and believe in the sky again, that her shame wrapped itself in silence, and her silence became Leila's cage. And while she didn't expect forgiveness, she needed Leila to know she'd always been worthy. Marie had simply never known how to love what reminded her of her own wounds. When Leila finished reading, the tears came not like they had when Jude died, not loud and gasping, but quiet, like grief discovering company. It was the most honest thing her mother had ever written, and though it didn't change a thing, it still mattered. She considered burning it, not in rage but in closure, but instead folded it gently and slid it into Jude's old cedar box with the postcards, leaving it there to settle in memory. That evening, under velvet skies, she did one small, significant thing. Opened the guest room window facing west, the one that had remained shut since she arrived. She placed a chair there, sat down, and rocked gently, hearing the creak of the wood echo childhood days when her father clumsily fixed the swing and her mother watched from a distance. Now she rocked forward on her own. No push needed. The next morning, a new letter came. This time not from family, but from Sarah, a former colleague who had once sent a quiet text when Jude died, but never followed up. Inside was a photo of Jude from a company volunteer day, and a letter longer than Leila expected. Sarah didn't offer excuses, only the truth, that silence was a decision, and that she had made the wrong one. That Leila hadn't just lost Jude, she'd lost dozens of people who should have stood beside her and didn't. You endured louder than he loved, Sarah wrote, and the world deserves to hear that story. Leila didn't write back right away, but she placed the photo on her nightstand, and for the first time in months, she began to write again. Not stories of sorrow or rage, but about Barrow's curve, about Jude's windows, about porch rain and shifting light, about a house that remembered love even when others forgot, about a woman who wept when it snowed and no longer felt shame in it. In the days that followed, 3 more letters came. No explanations, just quiet acknowledgments. I failed you. Failure doesn't always deserve forgiveness, but occasionally it opens rusted shut windows. And by week's end, when the first spring rain touched the stone rooftops of the house, Leila stepped barefoot onto the porch. And finally, the air didn't smell like endings, it smelled like change. And this time, it didn't hurt.
The garden became whispers around town. She lost someone too. She gives herbs for tea. You can bring your sadness there, no explanation needed. Leila hadn't meant to build a circle, but cracked hearts draw other cracked hearts. Sarah, her old coworker, appeared one Saturday. They sipped tea and didn't speak of betrayal, or the affair Leila suspected, or the absence at Jude's funeral. They talked about Basil, and Sarah cried, not from grief, but because she didn't have to pretend. Then came Leanne, Vincent's young niece, grieving her mother, ripping weeds from the soil too hard. Memorial services suck, she muttered. They feel fake. Leila simply asked, want to build something instead? And so the memory beds began, rows for those who'd lost people without words. They brought bookmarks, letters, worn shoes, faded scarves. Leila made handcrafted signs, first names only. Jude's read, Jude, heart holder. The garden wasn't a landmark because it was beautiful. It was messy, uneven, half wild.
But it was real, and every bloom whispered, "Someone survived to plant this." In early spring, Jessica appeared. No drama, no makeup, just a rosemary plant cupped in careful hands. "I never said sorry the right way," she said. Leila looked at her, then said, "You don't have to." "I want to." "Then plant it." And they kneeled together, not as enemies, not yet as friends, but as two women letting the earth carry what they could no longer hold. Later, Jessica said, "You don't seem sad anymore." Leila thought for a moment, then replied, "I still feel everything. I just stopped letting grief be in charge." The shift came quietly. Someone donated a bench carved with the words, "Place of Provision. Sit and say what you couldn't say when they were alive." Teenagers whispered to siblings, widows cursed the wind, even waiters confessed forgotten goodbyes. No one was judged. Just heard. When a basket of notebooks appeared beside the bench, people started writing, slipped their truths into rosemary stems and mailbox cracks. "I resented your illness. I never told you I was proud. I'm still angry, but I miss you." Some of the notes, they were Leila's. One sealed page beneath the lavender read, "Jude, it wasn't your job to save me, but you made me want to live again. Not because of you, but because you made me believe I was worth it. I finally believe you. I'm letting the pain become compost now. Love, L." When the lilacs bloomed that spring, Leila wore color again. A rust-orange linen dress Jude had never seen. She made soup, played music, danced barefoot on the porch. And when a scraped-knee child wandered in and said, "My grandpa died today," she didn't give advice. She handed over the watering can and asked, "Want to help me grow something that remembers him?" That night, she didn't cry, didn't search the sky for signs, didn't write to ghosts. She just sat beside the fire in a home built by love, inside a garden born of grief, a home without permission slips, performance, or shame. Just soil and stories. And blooms growing where sorrow once slept, in the cracks most people stopped noticing. The kind of garden that exists only where something broken dares to become something beautiful again.
3 years after Jude's death, the house in Barrows Curve had not just become a home, it had become a heartbeat. The garden was 4 times its original size, the memory beds now looping in the shape of an open palm, soft, ready, welcoming. The plaque at the gate bore new words. "You being here is enough," and beneath it, "If today you can't speak, sit by the violets. They were planted for you." And the violets were blooming. Marie had passed 6 months earlier. Leila planted those violets not in forgiveness, but in understanding. At the funeral, Amelia arrived late, wrinkle-worn, expression raw, and though she never spoke, she held up 2 fingers, a peace sign. Or maybe V for violet. It didn't matter. It was enough. Closure didn't come in caskets, but in choices. It came in spring, when Amelia returned to Barrows Curve with garden gloves and a clipboard, speaking softly of civic recognition. Leila had smirked. An award for being abandoned? But Amelia only replied, "For building something in the silence." And Leila had handed her a spade. They worked, not as healed sisters, but as co-caretakers of sacred soil. On the 4th anniversary of Jude's death, people came without invitation. There were no speeches, just herbs named after grief. Sorrow root, widow's balm, stone sage. They read quotes from Jude's journals, remembered his windows, how he shaped light. Vincent brought new glass. Sarah brought cardamom rolls. And Jessica, voice trembling but clear, offered one truth. Leila showed us what love looks like after the movies, when it's hard, when it's real. On her 5th birthday without him, Leila found a rusted tin box in the mailbox. Inside, a single paper swan folded from a napkin. On the wing, "Every day I remember how you held me through dying. That means more than any vow. J." And Vincent, seeing it, just smiled. That came from someone who knew where to stand. Leila never returned to the city. She didn't chase new love, though once there was a tender,
almost romance with a librarian who smelled like cedar and read Neruda aloud. It flickered. It passed. Still, it was worth lighting. At the community center, she taught a writing workshop titled Stories That Don't Fit in Obituaries. Dozens came, then more, until her classroom overflowed with untold truths. Wounds softened into words, grief translated into ink. Leila never critiqued. She only ever said the same 3 words: I believe you. Word of the garden spread, not through headlines, but through whispers, because bodies remember where they felt human again. And that's what the garden was, a place to rehearse being whole. The house evolved too. Warm light, moss at the windows, shelves of books, and a kettle with a note. Nothing heals faster than a cup you didn't pour alone. Visitors slept in the guest room above the garden, cried into hand-stitched pillows, woke with the scent of basil and forgiveness in their lungs, and left notes like prayers tucked into the mailbox. You saved me by existing. One day, a man with red eyes arrived with lilies and a letter. He said, I read about this place 4 years ago. I just wasn't ready. Leila opened the gate, said nothing, and he walked to the violets and wept like someone who finally had permission. That night, Leila returned to the drawer to Jude's last letter, the one she'd only ever read once, long ago, yet memorized by heart. You're going to keep going, Leila. You're going to grow things, and someday someone will sit in a garden you built and breathe again. Not because you told them to, but because you showed them how. She folded it back, whispered to the dusk, I love you more than yesterday, less than tomorrow. And the wind stirred the forget-me-nots maybe he heard. As lanterns bloomed across the garden like stars, Leila walked the paths slowly, touching names, petals, grief. Not healed, but becoming. Always becoming. And finally, when the gate needed one last truth, Vincent carved it in iron, bold and unmoving. Home isn't a place. Home is a choice. Today, I choose me.